We are starting with a very national agenda, which is that government says it requires $5 billion to permanently deal with Ghana's perennial flooding. The Works and Housing Minister, Francis Asensio-Boakye, who made this known at a media briefing in Accra, noted that work on the construction of 35 kilometers of drains have already been completed.
Many lives have been lost and properties worth millions of cedis destroyed due to constant flooding anytime it rains in several parts of the country, particularly Accra, the national capital. It is partly blamed on building on waterways and poor sanitation. The Minister for Works and Housing said government has made the biggest investment within the last 4 years to mitigate its impact.
Over the past 4 years, investment in flood control measures under the 2018-2020 National Flood Control Program has been the highest commitment by any government in our history, committing approximately 450 million Ghana cedis. To date, the 2028-2020 National Flood Control Programs have completed the construction of some 35 kilometers of drains, whilst over 1,000 kilometers of drains have been excavated, rechanneled, and maintained across the country.
He said additional funding would be required to permanently deal with the flooding.
To address the flooding issues in the country, the country will need about $5 billion. $5 billion to be able to address the flooding challenges across the country. But this was done some time ago, and I'm sure that if you have to use it, we have to have a review of it because a lot has happened since then.
The ministry, he noted, will support MMDCEs and DCEs to pull down structures on waterways.
Let's go to Zoom now and speak to Francis Nate Okanse. He is a water resource engineer and geospatial data science enthusiast. Good evening, sir. Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
First, to start with, what would your assessment be if you had to diagnose the flooding problem, especially in Accra? What would that be?
I want to look at it from 2 points. The uncontrolled urbanization in what we call the urban sprawl, which is due to the fact that we are having impervious surfaces all over the place. And secondly, the frequency of high intense rainfall, which is due to climate change.
And from where you sit, the current problems that we are facing, is it a money problem?
Well, it's both. But I'm happy to hear the minister announcing that we require about $5 billion to solve the house flooding problem. But I should think that this figure emanates from a certain plan, concept, or some feasibility studies. So we really have to know the document that is proposing this cost in solving the drainage problem. So it is both, because we need to carry the people along and we need the engineers to do their work, we need data. So it's a whole facet of activity that needs to be done. Simply doing drains or roadside drains is not sufficient to solve the problems.
And it clearly sounds like a multifaceted problem. Where should we start tackling it from?
Basically, the assemblies must enforce the laws. We rather should have planning permission instead of building permits, whereby the land use factor will be the prime requirement before you are given the permit to build, where we regulate the amount of, I'll sound a bit technical here, the amount of runoff before your building was put in and the amount of runoff that came after your building is put in. We have to control the pre-development and post-development runoff. And it has to be done at the household level because it's the aggregation of all these impervious services from commercial areas, from housing estates, from wherever, that come together to sort of cause the flooding in the low-lying areas.
And from what you said, is it a problem we can start tackling now? Because if you're mentioning issues of housing and, illegal structures springing up in waterways, are we going to start a demolition campaign to make sure that at least water is allowed to flow through some of these areas?
Yes, the slogan is make room for water. That is what the international make room for water or make space for water. So those who have encroached on the waterways need to vacate their places. And that mandate falls on the district assemblies to quickly do that. If there's any inertia, people are losing money, people are losing their lives. We cannot wait any longer. They have to act now. But then they should have the logistics ready. Because if they demolish and they don't remove the debris, then this problem hasn't been solved.
We have in recent times been hearing reports of flooding in the Ashanti region in Koforidua and even the northern regional capital Tamale. It's becoming a national problem. Do you think this blueprint for Accra should be the same we take to these regions to solve the flooding problem?
Well, that is why I'm saying that the estimates for solving the problem is a good angle to come from, but then we have to see the plan, because one size cannot fit all. We need different interventions depending on the location, because there are multifaceted angles to which you can solve problems. And basically, to really solve flooding issues at this current age is to start at the household level, where you are having rain harvesting tanks, you are having impervious surfaces, you are having green areas. Before you move downstream, then you put in the big hydraulic infrastructures like retention basins, detention basins on dams, and etc. So it's at the household level we must start tackling the problems from.
Right, and my final question would have to do with issues of degradation, and you mentioned urbanization. We have more people trooping towards the city centers. How do we make sure we have enough housing and accommodation for them, because we need to work on these lands? But in the same way, or in the same vein, making sure we do not allow these concrete surfaces to take over the space where water cannot flow.
Well, economic opportunities should be evenly distributed so that the migration will be reduced. That is why angle government can work on it. And government should take housing as a serious agenda, because housing requires planning, it requires proper designs, it requires proper constructions and provision for drainage structures. So once those things are done, you will be halfway solving the issue of problem. Housing is actually a key factor, and also our land administration regulations.
We're grateful for your time and your thoughts this evening. Francis Nateo Kansei is a water resource engineer and geospatial data science enthusiast. He's also a member of the Ghana Institute of Engineers.